Wheel of Genre, the show for readers who agree that life is more hellish than hell itself. Actual quote right there. Right now, we are reading every story in Ann and Jeff VanderMeer's The Weird anthology, including this one, Ryunosuke Akutagawa's The Hellscreen. I'm Zach, and this week I'm really interested in ekphrasis, the author describing works of art, and then also giving a description of the event that inspired it.
I'm Bob. I'm interested in characters and their doubles, or at least the perceptions we have of characters or others do, and then seeing them completely turned around so those perceptions are contradicted.
I'm Chris. I'm very much interested in talking about how much we have to sacrifice for the sake of our art and what we are willing to do for that. Also, I'm really happy to be here, guys. Thank you so much for having me.
Chris, we're so happy to have you. You go ahead, Zach. We're equally happy.
Yeah. Yeah, Chris from Liminal Spaces here. Mr. Chris Liminal, Mr. Chris Spaces, Mr. Criminal, I guess I'll call you.
I'll take it.
So we've been reading The Weird for, God, it feels like a long time now, even though we're only like 12, 13 stories in.
This is a fat book. It's a phone book. It's a phone book.
But we asked Chris if he wanted to join for an episode, and he picked out this one. I personally had never heard of Akutagawa before, except for knowing that he is the person who wrote the story Rashomon, or at least the film is a collation of a couple different short stories that Akutagawa has written. So, guys, what do we know about this author?
So Ryunosuke Akutagawa, first off, is hugely famous in Japan. In fact, they made a prize called the Akutagawa Prize in Japan that they give to new and upcoming writers. And it is the kind of premier prize that you can get in Japan. He grew up in, I think it's the Taisho era. I always get these confused trying to decide what the name of the eras are. But basically, he grew up in the era right after the Meiji Restoration, which was a very interesting time in Japan, where they had just opened the doors to foreign ideas and foreign peoples on the land, and they did this mass westernization that went like wildfire. It was so quick, and you can still see echoes of this today in so many aspects of Japanese life, down to the way that their school bell chime sounds. It's Big Ben, and all the way to the uniforms that they wear, the way that they present their bakeries. Like it's all over the place. And then in the Taisho era, we start to see this rise of nationalism, and it's a really strong reaction to this restoration time, or this time where they were looking at all this foreign ideas and letting these foreign ideas into the country. And people started looking back at more traditional Japanese stuff. And this is where you get the idea of the Japanese pure culture that is still pretty popular today, that they're the purest because of how long they had their doors closed to foreigners and stuff like that. But a lot of writers through this time, Mishima, of course, is the most popular, famous one. Mishima was obsessed with everything Western when he was young, and then became a total nationalist that was obsessed with everything Japanese as he got older. Akutagawa had a more subtle approach to this, in that he wanted to look back at these historical Japanese ideas, but he also liked a lot of the kind of westernization. He mixed the two instead of seeing them as two separate things that needed to always be at odds. And this story is a perfect example of this. I don't know if you want me to jump into a little bit of the background detail of the story itself.
Well, let me just say, I like what you're saying about a mixture of the two, because just as someone coming into this author for the first time, what I felt as I was reading it was it seemed like the form of it was very Western. It felt like I was reading, early 19th century short stories coming from Russia, UK, France, Germany, that type of thing. But if the form is like that, the content is just overstuffed with Japanese culture, and of course, like Chinese culture, Confucianism, things like
Sure.
that. But you know, the plum blossoms, for example, or the five virtues, the descriptions of the artwork itself, it's all Japanese content fitted into a Western short story form.
Yeah. And I don't know if you guys knew this. This is this plot he lifted from an ancient, well, not ancient, a medieval manuscript. So this plot is not his own plot. He had a tendency to do this often. There's a collection of short stories called the Uji Shui Monogatari. And that means collection of tales from Uji. And this plot he lifted from one of the stories there. He took this structure from the Western stories that he really loved, but also took this kind of classical Japanese idea of taking a plot from a medieval story in order to kind of merge these two concepts, I think.
Yeah, there's on Wikipedia, I actually found a synopsis of this story. I actually think Bob and I should read this sometime, but it's about the home of a painter of Buddhist images called Ryoshu catches fire. He manages to flee, but leaves behind his wife and children and watches how the flames engulf the house in astonishment and fascination, exclaiming now and then how beautiful the fire is and how badly he had been painting it until now. Since he shows no feelings towards his family inside, his neighbors think him crazy or possessed by an evil spirit, but he just calls them commoners without any talent.
Wow. I'm glad to know that because I wasn't able to find that wiki article. But it's interesting how little he took. I mean, the core concept is very obvious, but yeah, he created like I like that the monkey's all his because I love that monkey. Like
The
that is
monkey's great.
but we'll get to that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, this is something that I love in Western writing that I feel like you don't see very much anymore. Like authors pretty much just wholesale lifting plots from previous authors and manuscripts. Shakespeare taking from the Greek tradition or Boccaccio being another example, or Chaucer, and moving forward from then, people taking from them to inspire their stuff.
Well, fairy tale tradition, Boccaccio, like the frame story, and he didn't invent it, but because of that, some of the greatest European folk and fairy tale collections all have that frame story, the same exact way, and it was all inspired by the Decameron. I liked one of the things I love about fairy tales is that it reinterprets for every generation, and I think that's amazing. And I agree with you. It'd be fun to still see that occur if we had these tales that we reinterpreted through the ideology of whatever the current generation needed those stories to say.
Yeah. It's hard because I feel like people want people have this idea that genius is only original. You can only be original. Only a good author, or rather, a good author only writes original stories. But I think that it's just not. I don't know. I long for the olden days.
That feels very American to me. That concept, this perfect moment of genius that you're not allowed to touch or interpret in any way because it belongs to the individual. That's an interesting concept. We could talk about that for a whole.
Maybe we need a special episode.
That's right.
I could go off. Guys. So what do we have for translators here? Because I know that we have one translator for the weird fiction anthology, but I think the more popular one might be Jay Rubin's translation for Penguin.
And I have to admit to you guys, I started in here, and about probably 2 pages in, I switched to the Jay Rubin, just because I wasn't, and I'm interested to see what you guys think, because I think you stuck specifically to this version, right? I was not a fan of this translator. I felt like, and I have to discuss this on my channel a lot whenever I read stuff in translation. I even get mad at Jay Rubin for this sometimes. I felt like he was so obsessed with a direct translation that it became hard for the destination language reader to stick with. And I feel like Jay Rubin kept the destination language reader in mind a little bit more, and he might have sacrificed, and this is a huge debate. He might have sacrificed a little bit of the direct translation, but I believe that he gave us more of the experience of the story by considering the flow of what we would receive, if that makes any sense.
That's interesting.
Did you guys find it weirdly structured at all as you read it, or was it smooth for you guys? Maybe I'm just picky.
I personally didn't find it challenging, but I've read significantly worse written stories in this anthology. So just on like a language line by line level. So I don't know, Bob, what did you think?
I was fine with me, but this is the first time I've actually read Akutagawa.
Right.
So yeah, I don't have any exposure to Rubens, so I'd be interested in reading that version as well.
Yeah. Well, it's already checked out on the Internet Archive, apparently.
Oh, yeah. Oh, I did want to say, though, because I like to read while I listen, because it helps me pay attention a lot. I found a really good reader who I think is maybe as good as Horror Babble. His name is Thomas Barker, and I keep thinking of him as Travis Barker, but Thomas.
Is he on YouTube?
Yeah, it's called Tom's Terror Trove. I think he's only got about 53 videos, but he says a new story comes out every Friday, 9 a.m. New Zealand time, and he's an extremely good reader.
Wow.
Yeah.
Cool. That's awesome. Yeah, because I can't do this the two at once, but a lot of people are now. Yeah, I don't know why those two things cannot happen for me at the same time. But I can do either of those things separately, so I always like when I find a good reader. That's awesome. I don't know if now is the time, but the first translation of this was by W.H.H. Norman, and it came out in 1948, and this is an American first edition.
Cool.
Cool.
And I'm super happy to have it. It's got other stories in there, but the best part about this, and what I wanted to show you, and I don't know if I should wait until the specific time in the story, but I have never seen more interesting illustrations in a book before than this one. And this is, of course, the tortures that this poor acolyte of this painter has to go through in order for him to draw the Hellscreen. You can see the owl that chases him and the snake on the ground, and he is in chains. And I just thought that's the most incredible thing I've seen in any of my American Japanese first editions. Really wild.
Whoa, that's incredible.
Yeah, so there you go. There's that.
That's so cool. I had no idea there were illustrations. Even fold-out illustrations in color in a book.
Right? It blew my mind when I got it, because I think I got it at an estate sale or a yard sale, and I was just like, oh, this is old, this is cool, and then I was like, what is this? It's amazing.
Jackpot.
Yeah, so I personally feel that if I were to recommend... I know we're assuming people have already read this, but if I were to recommend translator, I would go with J. Rubin in this case. This new translation is incredible. Also, the Penguin book has a introduction by Haruki Murakami, which was a wonderful read.
Oh, cool.
Okay, guys, I think we should talk about what happens in the story. Then we can start picking apart different things we really liked, elements that we thought were impressive. But this is a story happening. There is a lord, the High Lord Harikawa, and we meet him at the very beginning, and the narrator's telling us, okay, this is a very special High Lord. He's very moral, he's very humble, and everything he does, we are in awe of it.
He's almost the Buddha.
He's almost the Buddha.
Enlightened and perfect, yeah.
But he does these weird, surprising things. He walks into a group of ghosts and he tells them to vamoose, and they do. But he has this weird painter, and this painter thinks he's the best guy ever. And he goes around saying, I, the greatest painter, Yoshihide. But he has this daughter, and she is renowned for her filial piety. She's very devoted to her daughter. And when Harikawa asks her to be a lady in waiting, Yoshihide refuses. And so there's this kind of grudge that's bubbling underneath this story the whole time. Then we get to other pieces. We meet different characters. We meet this monkey who I think we're all very excited to talk about this monkey, who is also called Yoshihide. But then Yoshihide, this amazing painter, needs to paint a scene of hell. the Lord has asked him to paint a screen, and he decides he's going to do one of hell. But he can only paint things if he has seen them. So right there, that's a big red flag, because he is going to have to go and find scenes of torture or scenes of destruction to be able to depict them on this screen. Now, as he does this, he is making this thing more and more hellish, and then he has some kind of divine inspiration. It's actually a scene taken from Julius Caesar, Shakespeare's Julius Caesar, where this god or demon or thing comes to him in a dream and says, "Come down with me to hell." And he sees this carriage floating from the sky going down into hell, and this woman suffering in it, burning inside of this carriage. Now he has his inspiration for the final scene. But what Harikawa agrees to becomes quite a twist for Yoshihide.
Is that really from Julius Caesar?
Well, the way that he structures it is exactly from Julius Caesar, because because Brutus says, okay, he's getting really nervous, and he tells his servant boy, please stay in the room. There's almost no reason for it, but he says, please stay in the room. I don't feel very comfortable. And then he finally goes to sleep, and then Caesar appears in his dreams, telling him, like, you killed me, you're going to go to hell, all of these things. And he is heard, and the servant boy is freaked out. All of the guards are freaked out. But it's almost the same exact scene. And it's a weird thing where the servant boy is like, why are you making me stay here? And then because of that, the ghost comes in and haunts him.
Yeah, and we know that Akutagawa was very much into a lot of Western literature, so
For sure.
Yeah. And he was also into taking stuff from medieval manuscripts, so I could easily see that happening. Wow, that's interesting. I didn't catch that. Good catch, man.
I think so. I think because Julius Caesar was, Romeo and Juliet is now the one everyone reads in high school, but
Right.
It used to be Julius Caesar, and I think it would have been Julius Caesar at the time of Akutagawa while he was studying Western literature.
I'm sure, yeah.
I love this painter. I love this detail about him where he can paint beauty, but for some reason he's drawn to painting ugliness. And I think that there's something really unique about this idea of like someone who's so good at painting that they can actually render ugliness in art form. Do you know what I mean? Like I feel like, okay, there's a difference between good painting and bad painting. And a bad painting, it's probably ugly, but a good painter can paint something that is beautiful and yet also viscerally ugly. Like in some ways that is like an even higher skill level than just someone who paints beautiful pictures. You know what I mean? So that detail to me was like almost this like this touch of like supernatural, like he's been touched by the muse in a sense. It actually justifies his massive ego that he shows throughout it. At least to me, I thought that was a great character detail to back it up.
Well, and I think also most of everybody that knows him does think he's the world's greatest painter. Mm-hmm. I feel like the Lord loves his work. He does. They just hate putting up with him. And I think that one of the reasons that he is so attuned to what is ugly is because of the fact that he's ugly, that his face is such that it makes him a pariah in any social situation that he's in. And I wonder, I mean, it's weird to think about, like, I am the best at this, like I'm the best, and everybody disrespects me when I'm in a room because, and I think it goes into an explanation of his bulbous nose. I don't want to confuse it with Yam Gruel, which is one that I read recently as well, another Akutagawa story. But I think there's quite a description of what makes this painter very ugly. And I wonder if that has kind of become an obsession for him of these two things coming together. And I don't know, Bob, I don't know if you agree or not, that I feel like it's weird because our narrator, totally jumping tracks here, is unreliable as all get out. We've got like this servant that worships this Lord like he's a god, and obviously this Lord has serious issues. And he's not a great guy at all. But I felt like the book introduced the concept of Yoshihide as an absolutely incredible artist. Like it's no joke. His art is absolutely fantastic, even though he's terrible to be around. I don't know if that's the idea you got, Bob.
I was really thinking about this story. Akutagawa was really famous for the Rashomon story, which he's more famous for the In a Grove, which the plot for Rashomon is more about In a Grove, but with the title. Of course, I have a personal connection with Rashomon because you can also translate it as Lord Robert's Gate, but it's
I think it just means like giant gate in Japanese, doesn't it?
Well, it means like the gate of the outer wall, because it's in Chinese it'd be Luo Shengmen. And so my name is Luo, so I can
that's awesome.
It's a bad pun. But that story is all about, and it's now called the Rashomon effect, because the idea is there are so many people who have seen some event, or they know about a murder, and there's all of these witnesses who each tell a different story, and then there's 3 murderers who each tell a different story, and how can all of them be correct? But it's never even proven, and that's why the movie's so famous too.
Yeah.
But in this, at the very beginning, the narrator's talking about Harikawa and how amazing he is. We talked about that. But he also says, it reminds me, though, he says, we should keep in mind the ideas that different people have different opinions. As with the proverbial blind men who touched different parts of an elephant and drew contradicting conclusions about the animal. Yeah. Now, I think when we look at these characters, we can see how they are really amazing, but then how they're also really disgusting. And they have all of these kind of opposites. And I was thinking about Yoshihide. You talked about him being ugly. He's called a monkey. Everyone says he looks like a monkey, and they call him Monkey Hide. They even say his lips are so red that they wonder if he sucks on the red paint of his painting, and it makes him look bestial. And so they start calling him Monkey Hide, but then they get a real monkey.
They get a real monkey. Straight up. They get it. I mean, that's the coolest part. They get a real monkey.
And they call the monkey Yoshihide. And whenever Yoshihide, the monkey, steals something, they run after it going, Yoshihide, Yoshihide. So there's this strange idea of these characters who are the best at something, but then they're also brought down so low because of comparisons with something.
That's great. Yeah, and I think it's also important to say that the daughter of Yoshihide, who has gone into this service, I guess, of this lord, loves this monkey. Like she forms this bond with this monkey, and everybody's like, oh, that's filial piety, perfectly, just because the monkey's name is Yoshihide, which I have no idea if that's her desire, if that's why she's so happy with this monkey, but they're like, oh my god, it's like the perfect example of, she even loves the ugly animal that was named after her dad because her filial piety is so strong.
And that's a perfect example of what I would consider to be a kind of like Western influence on this, in the sense of okay, we have a character who we're told has filial piety. So how do we show that? Well, if we were being, level 1 would be just to tell you that. Level 2 would be to have her do something that shows filial piety to her father. Level 3 is to have an animal named after her father who she loves. It's like abstracting the symbol a little bit further each time.
Yeah.
But by having that monkey, what it does is, for me at least, it made me compare the behavior of the monkey with the behavior of the father in a way that because the monkey changes and the father doesn't. I wouldn't say the father necessarily changes. I don't know if you guys agree with that, but for example, the monkey starts out a beast,
right?
But he finds his way into the court and into the kind of circle, the gravitational well of power around the king. The monkey understands that its role in the court is to do tricks and bow and make everyone laugh, and then he collects his scratches and some bites to eat. I don't feel like the father truly understands his role in the court. You know what I mean?
Well, it's, unless you consider his paintings, his scratches and treats. Which I mean, he's only there for his paintings. If he didn't, if he wasn't a good painter, I think they'd kick him to the curb. But
totally.
Yeah, it's interesting. Also, what's interesting is the two characters that we're given the least amount of development for, because we get physical development for the monkey, and we get this filial piety perfection from the daughter, are the only two characters in this that we can say by any stretch of the imagination are good, or at least not tainted by all this freaking weirdness that goes around about the concept of how you create art. And both of those characters end up in the carriage, right? No good deed goes unpunished. It's interesting that I think Akutagawa was only interested in the good unsullied characters to be juxtaposition against all the evil that is in this court. That only those two characters are hurt in the end. Well, the artist really is too, but it's his own stupid fault. I mean, really.
I think there's this was making me think a lot about, if he is studying Western literature, he's also studying ancient Chinese literature. And I was thinking there's an author called Pu Songling who did lots of short stories and poems, but they are often about the border between humans and animals, and also like possessions with different kinds of demons, being tricked by demons. So I don't know if you guys have ever heard of this book, but it's called, the English is...
Oh, yes.
Yeah,
I have that same copy.
Cool. Oh,
yeah, no, it's really strange because I studied fairy tales, so I'm constantly looking for folk and fairy tales, and you can find these westernized kind of retellings of Chinese fairy tales, but I felt like I was so far from the source that it was ridiculous, and every time I researched, that's the book that came up over and over again. Unfortunately, I haven't started reading it yet, but I think I got it about probably 3 months ago off of eBay. So yeah, I'm really excited about that book. That's cool.
Chris, you're gonna love it. There's tons and tons of stories. Some of them are only 5 or 6 pages. Lots of them about monks being really seditious. Some are like, I just looked at one called God of Hail, the Wounded Python. Wow. Lots of them, they're about being up in the mountains and then running into different deities or different things that are pretending to be deities. And it made me think of the monkey here too. You said that, the girl and the monkey are unsullied, but the girl's the perception of her is sullied because they start talking about her as being sleeping around. Someone catches her, the narrator catches her with her kimono open, running away, and there's a man's voice, and he says, "Oh, what's happening here? She used to be so pious." And then the Harikawa says, "Oh, she is a fallen woman, and that's why they burn her." So they have these terrible perceptions that they've decided, and they've decided to define evil in their own way. But then they also, the monkey, like, comes down from the sky almost like a god or a demon in a fireball, right? And then picks this girl up, and they ascend together. So in this kind of like sublimation of suffering and pain into art that Yoshihide is always trying to do, so he can depict it, they ascend into art, but they also like ascend into heaven almost. So I think if you like that, you'll definitely like this book. There's lots of stuff like this.
That's awesome. You're the only other person I've heard bring it up, because I mean it's strange if you just type in Chinese fairy tales in English, the information is scarce, and that is the only book I've been able to track down so far.
It's not as popular in the West, and it's funny because in the East, yes, these are ghost stories, but also this is considered like in Chinese, some of the hardest writing ever, because he uses some of the most obscure and like highly specific 4-character phrases, and those you have to just study. There's a great horror show actually on Netflix about this, a killer who kills people if they get these 4-character phrases wrong. And anyway.
Is the 4-character phrases like the ma that are all different tones?
Oh, not that, but when you put 4 things together, let me give you a real quick example and we get back, sorry. To give you one example, there's a 4-character phrase. They're called chengyu gusu, so they're chengyu, like an idiom, but they all have really long stories. So each one, Chris, you'll love it because each one is basically a fairy tale condensed into 4 words that represent
That's an interesting idea. That's
the English equivalent would be something like "every dog has its day."
Yeah.
Okay, just an idiom. Okay.
Yeah, but
the whole story.
If it's referencing, Japan. of course, like in like the maybe the 5th century, takes the Chinese language and a lot of the Chinese literature, like all of it, and completely structures its government and its literature on Chinese, on a Chinese basis. And the literary reference over there is much more important than it is here, I think. I mean, we have stuff like The Wasteland, T.S. Eliot's The Wasteland, where you have to like be like, okay, what is he referencing here? Like line by line by line. But like waka poetry, which is haiku, is just the introduction to waka poetry. They'll say something like, "My sleeves are wet," and that refers to this poem. That refers to this poem, and then you get down to it, means they've been crying and rubbing their sleeves. It's amazing how important reference is. Yeah, that's really interesting. Full fairy tales into 4 words. I love it. I'm gonna have to find more about that. That's really cool.
Bob, can you tell me the name of that Netflix show, since I'm now studying Chinese by watching movies on Netflix?
If you guys want to watch that show, you can look on Netflix, and you can even use, go to the Taiwanese Netflix, but it's called GG Precinct. It's very good. It's capital G, like good game. But in Taiwan, when you say GG, it means you're dead. So it's this.
Okay.
Yeah, it's this group of detectives who are like, silly detectives, but then they track down this teacher who is just. It's the Hannibal story, where there's the old killer who's already in jail, and now there's a new killer, and they're both killing because of these mistakes for these Chengyu. They're using idioms incorrectly by like 1 stroke wrong.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sounds awesome. Okay.
It's really good.
I've lost our thread
teacher.
now.
Chris, I want to get back to, I was really curious about what you were saying. Earlier, you made a comparison between Mishima and Akutagawa, and I was always interested in Mishima's, the ultra-nationalism, but he also had an idea of, look, in his era anyway, and they're separated, Mishima would have been, I think, 3 years old or 2 years old when Akutagawa died.
Right.
But he has this idea of, look, Japan used to have 2 sides. One was the pen, one was the sword, but what he means is like, all of the beauty, so like the ikebana, kimono, all of that. But then we also had the samurai, the sword, and the violence. And now, post-World War II, all of that has been taken away, and now Japan is only defined by the beautiful things. So that's why he got really into bodybuilding. That's why he got really into this. Well, other reasons too, but that was one obsession. And I was wondering, this idea of Akutagawa and Mishima, who just went super hard into their art, super suffered because of their art, and just not overcommitted, but went so far that their families were not very happy. Yeah. Akutagawa died at 35 by overdosing on barbital. Mishima, his suicide is for nationalism, but it's also seems deeply tied to his writing. What do you think? And
if you read, have you read the Sea of Tetralogy series?
Oh no, not yet.
I mean, Sea of Fertility, Tetralogy. It's incredible. If you guys want to, we're reading it in the beginning of the year. It's cool. Some of the best fiction, Japanese literature I've read in my life. It's wonderful. And Spring Snow, the first, is my favorite. But each book is, well, first off, he claims that this was kind of his final message, his suicide message. Wow. I don't know if we can use that word. And,
we're going to use it anyways.
All right. Each book is what he felt was the spirit and heart of the generation. So the first one is westernization and decadency of the aristocracy. The second book is hardcore nationalism. The third book is, after World War II, a turn to religion. So it's all kind of Buddhist stuff. And then the fourth book is the 70s, and I can't give it away, but it's absolutely... I mean, the statement at the end is incredible. But anyway, I think that, and there's I don't know if I'm going to be able to pull this out very easily. There is a book he wrote. Yeah. I think this is it. Yeah, this book, which also has the manliest Yukio Mishima cover ever. It's called Sun and Steel. And a lot of this is about art. A lot of this is about writing and art. And of course, to him, that was really mixed with nationalism and bodybuilding, like you said, and all that kind of stuff. But he was a man of contradictions. Like
for sure.
Confessions of a Mask is all about what it means to be gay in Japan at the time. And then he later married and loved everything Western, and then went completely nationalistic. I'm sorry, I could talk about him for hours, but I think I love what you're talking about, because it's about how far you're willing to go for your art. And I think it's interesting because my daughter loves anime. And so I'll sit and watch anime with her, and she'll ask questions like, why is this person, and it's a cool anime montage, why is this person standing outside for 3 days punching a wooden pole? And I have to explain, like, this is because in the ideology of this culture, that's how you do it right. Like if you don't give 100% dedication to the thing that you're gonna do, or you're supposed to do, or you want to do, depending on where you fall in the in Japan's hierarchy, then you're not doing it right. And there are coded actions that show that you are properly giving up everything for your art of choice, whether it be making sushi or painting screens. And I think that this concept, and I wish I knew enough to say where that began. That could have come from China in the 5th century, for all I know, because so much culture was important, or it could be uniquely Japanese. I don't know. But I feel like Akutagawa and Mishima were obsessed with that idea. Like, there's a whole thing in this book where Mishima's talking about staring into the void, and the void is art. And you have to basically lose yourself looking into the void until you're looking at your lost self from the void. Like, just wild stuff about sacrificing everything for art, which I feel like is the absolute point of this story. In the end, I think that Akutagawa is wrestling in many ways with his own art. Like, how far are you willing to go for that perfect Hellscreen, or that perfect novel or book? So moving on a little bit, I think that after we get these great antics with the monkey, which I really enjoyed, we move to kind of the darker concept of this story, which is him creating this Hellscreen, and the idea that he has to see something physically in order to be able to paint it. And we start to get him torturing his poor acolyte, which is the picture that I showed earlier from the book, where he's chaining this acolyte up and releasing a snake on him and releasing an owl, and he's slowly spiraling down. And it's interesting because I feel like in the West, when we look at this idea, it's always the suffering of the artist, right? That when an artist suffers, the art is purer and better somehow. That's not what I specifically think, but that's what I think is kind of the belief of the zeitgeist, right, in the West. It's interesting to me that in this case, he needs to see the suffering of others in order to create beautiful and wonderful, perfect art.
To me, it's very disturbing because he's ruining. Well, it's not really his fault, but the Lord Horikawa decides, okay, if you really want this, if you want to be so bold as to find suffering, go in search of suffering, to depict it and to become legendary, to become the greatest painter in the world, I'm going to really give it to you. So when he goes and asks, like, can you help me get this carriage? He says, yeah, of course I'll get you the carriage. And Horikawa just starts laughing as if he's really enjoying whatever is going on in his mind. Later, when he sets this all up, they go into this old abandoned village that I think is his sister-in-law's or his sister's, that's just kind of haunted. they set up the carriage, and he says, "Look, I know you recognize that, don't you? Now let me pull the screen aside so you can see who's inside." And of course, it's Yoshihide's daughter. When they burn it, it's just this true hellscape. It's absolute torture. But I feel like Harikawa is kind of, I mean, he's going pretty far in this. He is the patron, but also he is the one who's kind of set up to be the judge in this book, where we have all of these ambivalent characters. You know, the daughter who is the fallen daughter, but also the perfect daughter. The man who is the monkey and the man. But then Harikawa is the one who is always making decisions, and it seems like value comes from his decisions. I wonder what happens when the Lord, or the highest person in the story, is the one to have the ultimate say. Like, if you want this perfect sublimation of pure violence and torture into high art, here I'm going to give it to you and kill your daughter. What is that saying?
Yeah, it's interesting because it winds it back around to the suffering of the artist.
Yeah.
So in this case, there was so much suffering in between, but it folds back again. And of course, our last final thought is that Yoshihide hangs himself at the end of the story, but at the time, and this is what I think he took from Uji Shui Monogatari, this Tales of Uji. At the time, he is looking at it, and his what I took is his realization that, yes, I can paint this now. He becomes satisfied, which is the only way I can really describe how I kind of felt. I don't know if that's how you guys took the ending.
You know what's interesting too? You said he's got a hunger, almost a thirst for this, to pursue this art. Akutagawa.
It's a hard name.
It is.
It means dragon child.
Cool. Dragon child.
Ryunosuke does.
Oh, Ryunosuke and Akutagawa. Sorry, Akutagawa's pen name for his haikus was Hungry Ghost. Ugwe, or Gaki, I think is the Japanese. Yeah. So he, even in writing, is the hungry ghost, just like it sounds like Yoshihide is too, you know, going so far, sacrificing your soul to make your soul into art.
Yeah, and I feel like we can very confidently say through textual evidence in this story that this is Akutagawa discussing his views on art, his concepts of how much you have to give up for art. And this poor man died very young after writing Kappa, which, if you haven't read, is absolutely incredible. And it is kind of his it's a retelling of a Japanese fairy tale, and it's kind of his farewell, the same way that Mishima did. Mishima could have gotten the idea of writing a novel as a farewell from Akutagawa, for all I know. It's he was so obsessed with the concept of his own art that and this is one thing that I've noticed. This is one thing that I love about Japanese literature in general, is they will discuss obsession in ways that I don't feel like we do in the West as much. And I know that obsession is discussed out here, but in Japan they have obsession, it feels like, down to an art form that is so strong it's almost a trope. That there's novel after novel of people obsessed with weird things, weird art, weird sexual mores, all different kinds of stuff. And I think that this, in the end, is a novel about obsession. And I think, for one moment, Yoshihide at the end is very pleased. And that's where all the weight of the story falls to him, I think. Is that moment where he's very, very pleased. And of course, afterwards, he can't keep that up. The truth of it comes to him afterwards, and he can't deal with his life after that.
I agree with you that he is very pleased, but what that pleasure does is complicate the meaning of his death the following morning, because he's pleased. The sequence is he's pleased, he finishes the artwork, and then he dies. So the immediate question mark over that is the death out of guilt, which I think is a perfectly reasonable reading, or is the more maybe interesting reading is the death because he feels like he's completed his masterwork.
Oh, that is brilliant, Zach. I didn't even think about that. You're right. He totally finishes his piece right after that. That's, yeah. Yeah, I agree.
If it was guilt, I don't know if he would finish the work. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. Yeah, that pleasure has to lead to, like he has sacrificed all for completing the piece. And you're right. Maybe the completion of the piece is where the loss that could have a little bit to do with his daughter, but might be mainly about the loss of that completed work. That's really brilliant. I think I might have read this differently than Bob, and this could be translation, but I believe very strongly that this story is inferring, especially because the unreliable narrator is constantly saying the Lord had nothing to do with Yoshihide's daughter, even though there was rumor everywhere that he wanted to marry her or be with her or whatever. I don't remember exactly what it says. I believe that the scene where the monkey grabs the servant and pulls him to her room and she is covering up and there's a man running away, there's a heavy implication that is the Lord Horikawa and that he was assaulting her.
Yeah.
And that is the reason that he agrees to, because my first thought is if he likes this daughter as much as everybody loved this daughter, why would he ever put her in the carriage? And I think that he put her in the carriage because she turned him down, and then he was almost caught assaulting her and decided that if he couldn't have her, like typical, kind of pride chest beating, he decided nobody could. That's just kind of how I read it.
No, I've read it the same way.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, it's all kind of implied because, like you said, the narrator is unreliable, and he says, of course, there's no reason that he would really like this one. He keeps denying it. But yeah, it seems like it's Horikawa going in there to assault her. Yeah, and then that makes more sense why he put her in the carriage, too, because if he was denied, he's getting his bad revenge. Yeah,
that's the one part of it that reminded me of In a Grove.
Oh,
where you have unreliable people talking about assault.
Yeah.
It was interesting. Yeah.
And I do feel like, I know we keep calling him the unreliable narrator, but I think it's really a case of the code speaking narrator in the sense of the physical, like the literal words he's saying is how great this person is. But then it's followed up with, let me give you an example of how great this person is. And then I'll tell you like the worst thing, or like just an absolutely terrible thing.
Oh, interesting.
So I think it's like a court politics of you always have to say, oh, the honorable this person. But actually the entire substance of the story is actually how terrible the Lord is. And it really all, like, even though Yoshihide, we'll call him quirky, even though he's quirky, the final judgment, the final rendering of the action here is done by the Lord. And there's that moment where, Yoshihide proposes that they burn the carriage. It says, the Lord's face darkened for an instant, but a second later he burst into laughter. All your wishes shall be granted. Half choking in his merriment, he added, don't worry. The Lord's words struck me, and a terrible premonition gripped my chest. The Lord seemed infected with Yoshihide's madness. White froth gathered at the corners of his mouth, and his eyebrows twitched. As he paused, his throat still vibrated with laughter. So, no matter what good things he says on the surface, the actual physical descriptions of everything do not make this seem like anything but a mad king, or a petty king, or an unjust king.
Spot on. Again, I think that's awesome. It's interesting because if you think about In a Grove, people are admitting to murder in order to follow honor. They'd rather admit to something that they didn't do and be killed for it than have a social fall. I think we're very obviously dealing with society that your reputation is so important. So I think that makes perfect sense that he has to speak about his Lord. I mean, filial piety was about parents, but was about way more than that. It went all the way up the government hierarchy. So yeah, I think that's a great way to look at it. I think you're absolutely right.
Just to add on real quick, to connect that to the monkey Yoshihide, when I said that the monkey knows his kind of place in the gravitational well of the court, I think the person Yoshihide doesn't understand the piety. The emperor asks for your daughter's hand in marriage. He says no. He turns down the emperor. And so in that sense, he is there because of his art, but everyone hates him and they openly mock him,
Yeah.
So it's kind of this thing of the person doesn't seem to understand his place within the hierarchy, even though he's there, but the monkey does. And that's why the monkey changes.
Yeah. And that's why the monkey's accepted.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Interesting.
I've been thinking about in this collection, the stories in this collection, the VanderMeers say this story has it's bubbling underneath with the weird. And one idea I had when we first started reading it, since the three of us are all reading it, is sometimes these authors have to kind of experience their story in a certain way. It's not just a ghost story that's supposed to be frightening for the reader. It's almost like the artist has to suffer a little bit or go through some kind of... it's like that void idea you were saying earlier, Chris, about Mishima looking into the void and the void speaking through him. Because I was thinking about Yoshihide having to suffer through his art or having to torture, cause suffering in others for his art. And it made me think of like Christ, going through all of this suffering and at the end saying, "It is finished," and then being killed. Here, right. Yoshihide, his masterwork is finished and then he dies. But it makes me think of this ambivalence that this author has, and that maybe some of these other like weird stories have, where we can't tell if the inspiration is demonic, which it seems to be because all of his dreams are about demons talking to him, or is there a difference between two different kinds of inspiration, like a divine inspiration and a demonic inspiration, and what does it mean for the weird author to kind of be siding with this demonic inspiration and then thinking, what have I done? Have I done something good or done something bad by creating this?
You just answered a huge question I had, which I'm really happy about. So there's another story by Akutagawa that is about people in hell.
Oh yeah,
and a spider comes down, and this person, it's very fairy tale. This person saved the spider when he was alive. It was the only good deed he did. So the spider's like, "Climb up my silk, and you can get out of hell." And he's like, "Okay," and he starts climbing up, and then every soul in hell grabs onto the thread and starts climbing up, and it breaks and they all fall back down. And I was thinking to myself, that is a much, in my opinion, better choice for a weird anthology. But I think you're right. I think it lacks the human agency, the connection of the going through of the torture themselves that this one does, and that was something I wanted to bring up, and I think you've answered it perfectly. That's why they chose this one. I think that's a really good point.
All right, well, Chris, thank you so much for coming on, sharing your ideas. Can you tell us, and for anyone watching, how to find more of you? What are you up to? What do people have to look forward with your stuff?
Well, I am Liminal Spaces 03. Apparently, Liminal Spaces was a terrible name for people searching, which I didn't realize. I figured, but after the Back Rooms came out, which was all about liminality, everybody searches for that. But anyway, Liminal Spaces, if you add that 03, you can find me on YouTube. I am... Right now, I just finished the Book of the New Sun, which is just layers upon layers. I could talk about that for years. I really, really enjoyed it. And now I'm reading the second book in Michael Moorcock's Elric saga. And the first book was good. I enjoyed it. It was Sword and Sorcery. The second book just starts out with the craziest... I get now why people really love talking about the weird that is Michael Moorcock. So I'm very excited to be talking about that as well. And honestly, you guys, thank you so much for having me. I've been loving Will of Genre for so long. It's kind of, I feel a little starstruck being here on the channel. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.
I think we should be feeling starstruck.
No way.
Well, thank you again, Chris, so much for coming on. I really hope we can do this again sometime soon, talk to you later, Bob and Chris.
Talk to you later, Chris and Zach.
Talk to you later, Zach and Bob.